The White House is making a major change in Minneapolis. The president is sending border czar Tom Homan to help lead immigration enforcement operations in the city.
Well, that move comes after a strong Republican response to the latest deadly shooting by federal officers. Wendy Griffith has more.
President Trump is shaking up the leadership of immigration enforcement operations in Minnesota after the fatal shooting of 37-year-old Alex Preddy. At least 29 Republican members of Congress are now demanding a full investigation. The Department of Homeland Security now reviewing body camera video showing multiple angles of the shooting. The president sending in his border czar Tom Homan, who he says will, quote, report directly to me. And Gregory Bovino, the top Border Patrol agent in charge, reportedly is leaving as soon as today.
Mr. Homan is the point person for cooperating with state and local authorities and corresponding with them, again, to achieve this level of cooperation to subdue the chaos on the streets of Minneapolis.
The president now facing growing scrutiny within his own party over the administration's handling of the immigration crackdown and response to 2 fatal shootings.
Immediately when an incident like this happens, they come out guns blazing that we took out a violent terrorist. Hooray. Escalating the rhetoric doesn't help, and it actually loses credibility.
Republican Texas Governor Greg Abbott says the White House needs to recalibrate immigration enforcement tactics
to make sure that they are going to be able to remove these people without causing all the kinds of problems and fighting in communities that they are experiencing right now.
The White House Monday distancing itself from comments Saturday by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, who accused Preddy of domestic terrorism. But Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt also pointing the finger at Minnesota's Democratic leaders.
This tragedy occurred as a result of a deliberate and hostile resistance by Democrat leaders in Minnesota.
Also Monday, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz called President Trump to discuss how they can work together to quell the weeks-long unrest. The president posting on social media that he and Walz seem to be on, quote, a similar wavelength. The situation could have national implications. Democrats vowing to oppose a package that includes funding for the Department of Homeland Security, which could result in a partial government shutdown at the end of the week. Wendy Griffith, CBN News.
Well, CBN chief political analyst David Brody joins us now for more. So, David, explain the decision. It seems to be a demotion for Kristi Noem. What led to it?
There's a lot of factors here, but why don't we just kind of boil it down to this, Gordon? The White House is making a testosterone recalibration. That's pretty much what's going on here. They're bringing in Tom Homan, tough guy, by the way, but Tom Homan wants to concentrate more on getting the illegal criminals. Kristi Noem and DHS was really more focused on getting the quantity up, the numbers up, the amount of illegal immigrants in the country. That wasn't working very well. There were a lot of at-large raids, if you will, all around Minnesota. Now, to be clear, Gordon, the reason there were at-large raids is because Minneapolis, as you know, is a sanctuary city and they weren't cooperating. So that's where we are today. In other words, where we are specifically is Tom Homan meeting with the Minneapolis governor, Jacob Frey, and also the governor, Tim Walz, to come up with kind of a recalibration plan, which would be to lower the temperature. But at some point, the White House needs to get something out of it, and so does Minneapolis. We're waiting to see what those details will be. But there's going to be a new strategy going forward.
Well, the optics have been absolutely terrible, to just put it into political terms. Kristi Noem and that cowboy hat after the first shooting, and now Bovino with this, it's like he's a French general patrolling the trenches with that gray coat. It just doesn't make any sense to me that you would want to up your numbers in the face of that kind of civilian protest. Is just going to lead to the kind of violence that we see. Why would they escalate it even more and try to claim that this is domestic terrorism? I don't think a single American believed that. So why did they even try it?
Well, that's a great question. And I think this is some of President Trump's frustration with Kristi Noem. In essence, the rhetoric didn't match the moment. As a matter of fact, it was over the top. And I think this is part of the reason that you're seeing a change, for sure. But look, I think everybody gets swept up in the moment. Let's remember, and I'm not defending it at all. But what I am saying here is that let's remember this administration, Gordon, from Stephen Miller and others, has been very hyperbolic, if you will, with the rhetoric coming from this White House to say it's time to do some serious interior crackdown on immigration in this country. So, I mean, if you're Kristi Noem and DHS, you can make the argument, we'll say, look, we're just carrying out what the White House wanted us to do. In other words, let's go, let's get busy. So I think there's a little bit of, are we all on the same page here? And I think that's a big part of the issue here, Gordon.
Well, I hear you on enforcing the immigration laws, and I'm definitely on board with that. I still don't understand what Biden was thinking in opening the border and the millions of people that poured into the country and strained every single social resource that we had. It made no sense to me unless they're playing some kind of demographic game or presidential elector game and population count. But on the other side of it, having these dragnets with mass soldiers with assault weapons going in mass numbers door to door, it just, no, that's not an America that I think anybody wants. So why was that the tactic?
Well, it was the tactic because it came pretty much straight from the top. And when I say straight from the top, not necessarily President Trump, but Stephen Miller and others were saying, look, it's time to get busy. And I think because of that, they took that to mean, let's go. Now, having said that, Gordon, let's remember, and let's put this in proper perspective. They wouldn't have to be going door to door and whack-a-mole through these neighborhoods if the sanctuary city policies were not in effect. But because of that, they couldn't go to the local jails. This is what the administration wanted to begin with. Go to the local jails to say, hand us over your illegal alien or illegal immigrant criminals, and we'll take it from there. But they didn't cooperate. They, as in Minneapolis officials. That, therefore, led to the at-large kind of going to homes and business neighborhoods and businesses and, the 7-Elevens and all of that type of thing to try and find some of these illegal criminals, illegal immigrant criminals that the Minneapolis officials weren't allowing ICE to do their job. So, I mean, you see the problem here on both sides. Now, having said that, Gordon, let me be clear. I think what's going to end up happening here is that these at-large raids are going to, for the most part, stop. And I think what will end up happening is that Minneapolis officials will give the Trump administration access to Minnesota penitentiaries. Now, whether or not that means local jails, that's a different story. I don't think that's going to happen. But Minnesota penitentiaries may be a different matter. So I think there's going to be a compromise here, maybe potentially protest zones in terms of, hey, you need to get your people in Minneapolis, the protesters, back from law enforcement and let them do their jobs when they are on the streets at points. So I think this is some of the middle ground that has to be worked out, Gordon.
Well, I think there's another tactic the administration has on sanctuary cities or sanctuary states. Now, we're hearing governors say, I'm not going to cooperate with ICE. Why not withhold federal funding until they comply with federal law on illegal immigration? That's definitely in their ability to do, and from just an America I want to live in standpoint is a much easier way to deal with this than some kind of dragnet. How much is politics playing a role in the change and it just seems amazing to me that Minneapolis goes from the city that sheltered Somali fraud gangs into now the city where you have martyrs for the cause. It just, is this, should we look at this decision as just politics for the midterms?
Well, it's definitely bad politics, and I think that's a definite big part of it. Politics always plays a role. I think the PR has been, as you said, Gordon, an absolute nightmare. And so I think what's going to end up happening here is that ultimately this will all somehow shake out in the end, because the Trump administration specifically said during the campaign that they're going after the worst of the worst. That's why Tom Homan is there in Minneapolis this morning, because that was what he said all along, that he wants to go after the worst of the worst. The American people politically are on board with that. 55, 60, 65% polling shows Americans want illegal immigrant criminals kicked out of this country. That's what Tom Homan was always focused on, but it got broader than that. That's where Kristi Noem, DHS, all of that situation happened, and that was politically untenable for this White House.
Well, I think even more than that, when you have a 37-year-old mother shot, I mean, yes, in defense of the agent that was hit by her car, I mean, depending on your politics, you have a different view of that. But the man who was restrained on the ground, him being shot in the back, this shouldn't be happening in our country. It's again, it's not an America that I think anybody wants to live in. It needs to change, and I'm glad the president has stepped in to change it.
And shot multiple times, too. And so it's all under investigation. And also, Kristi Noem's rhetoric was blaming this guy, Alex Preddy, at first. And it was a domestic terrorism and all that. So you put all that together, and it was not a good situation for this administration. Yeah,
and in defense of the officers, why in the world are you carrying 2 magazines and a loaded weapon?
That's right.
Anyway, it's an incredibly sad situation for all of us.
Yes.
We mourn for their families, and I'm frankly mourning for the country. This isn't the America that we all dream of. Well, David, thanks for the analysis, and thanks for joining with us.
You bet. Thanks, Gordon.
In other news, the body of the last remaining hostage held in Gaza is now back in Israel. Brody Carter has that story and more from the CBN Newsroom. Brody?
Gordon, thanks. Israeli troops located the body of Ron Givili in a Gaza cemetery and returned it to Israel on Monday. Givili, a police officer, died defending Kibbutz Elumim, and his body was kidnapped into Gaza. His family thanked the IDF, the Netanyahu government, and all Israelis for their support. Israeli President Isaac Herzog released a short video showing he and his wife removing their yellow pins, which is the national symbol of the hostages held in Gaza. On this day in 1945, Soviet troops liberated the Nazi death camp in Auschwitz, where more than 1 million people died, most of them Jews. January 27th is now observed as Worldwide Holocaust Remembrance Day. A new book about the Holocaust tells the inspiring story of a rabbi in Bulgaria whose bold intervention saved tens of thousands of Jews. CBN's Raj Nair brings us this story.
During the Holocaust, as Hitler's final solution systematically exterminated Europe's Jewish population, a rabbi named Daniel Zion, who had become a messianic follower of Yeshua, became instrumental in rescuing tens of thousands of Jewish lives.
They went to see the king himself, and the Rabbi Daniel Zion delivered a letter to the king and say, if you hand the 50,000 Jews to Hitler, one day you're going to stand before God, and their blood will be on your hands, and this is how you'll be remembered. So God used them to bring the fear of God upon the government of Bulgaria and the king of Bulgaria.
This piece of little-known history is now told in the book Legacy of Hope, written by Avi Mizrahi. Now, he and his daughter Devorah are now seeing this story result in something truly miraculous inside Israel.
And through the story, you can actually share the gospel. Because here's a hero for our people who did something tremendous for our people, saving 50,000 Jewish people. That's not a small thing. Not only was he Jewish, but he also believed in the Messiah, Yeshua. So it's a story that Jewish people can get a hold of and Israelis can get a hold of.
This is a wonderful opportunity to sharing with our Israeli friends that you can be Jewish, you can even be a rabbi, Orthodox rabbi, and you can believe in Yeshua because he's the only hope. And when we Messianic Jews and Christian believers come together, we can stand together as the one human against the evil and overcome evil in such a time it is.
As bright as this evangelistic story has become in Israel, it's also set against the backdrop of a worldwide resurgence of anti-Semitism. From Manchester to Washington to Sydney's Bondi Beach, violence and hatred against the Jewish people are rampant. CBN News asked Devorah what Christian believers can learn from the legacy of hope.
Through it all, they never gave up, and they did not stay silent. For them, they were vocal. They prayed. They gathered Jews into their homes, into their churches. They were vocally and very much active in saving of the Jews of Bulgaria. Who knows if by us being active, maybe by our actions, they will see their Messiah and the veil will be removed. And I said, it's actually now that we need to stand for the Jewish people when it's hard and when we're persecuted and when they're persecuted, even to risk our lives, because we know that the Jewish people are part of God's bigger plan. And if we want to be part of God's plan, we have to be part of this too.
Raj Nair for CBN News.
We certainly remember and honor the lives of those lost during the Holocaust. Gordon?
Well, it is Holocaust Remembrance Day, and let us remember and let us never forget, and let us continue to vow never again, that it should never happen on our watch. One of the great prayers my father taught me is don't ask God to come alongside your plan. Always ask God, can I be part of your plan? What are you trying to do in the world today? And when you join up with him and his plan, well, then wonderful things will happen, and you'll be part of the redemption of the world.